Hello there. Welcome to Intercept CSA, the podcast, where we break harmful silence with truth, healing, and protection, one conversation at a time. I'm Inimfon Samson, your host and guide for this conversation. Thank you for joining me. If you have parents or people caring for children around you, please make an extra effort to have them listening. Place your devices beside them. Invite them to lean in. Every bit of awareness counts for children. Now, a gentle reminder before we go any further. This conversation might be triggering. Remember to breathe, pause, and do what feels safe before you return. A few weeks ago, I was preparing for a speaking engagement. I had prepared my points and done my research, but as I tried to put finishing touches to the work, I thought, why don't I go out and sample the opinions of people around me on child sexual abuse? That way my talk would deal with real-time questions and perspectives. That conversation actually ended on a very sober, very sad, but impactful note. Sober in a way that I've come to expect, because somehow, almost every time I speak about child sexual abuse, at least one person in the room says, me too, or I went through that too. It's something I'm still trying to get used to receiving without my heart sinking or this rush of urgency running through me. However, that conversation, like I said, was impactful too, because it unexpectedly became an opportunity for us to exchange ideas on child sexual abuse and for them to confront some of the false beliefs they held about it. One thing stuck with me, though, from that conversation. Most of the people in that small circle didn't realize that child sexual abuse goes far beyond direct physical contact. They could agree that if they saw someone show pornography to a child, they would warn them, maybe even shove them away. But they didn't immediately recognize that as abuse. Yet it is a sexual violation. And for this podcast, and really for the work we do at Intercept CSA, when we talk about abuse, we're not just talking about what can get someone arrested. We mean anything that violates a child's sexual space, autonomy, or takes advantage of their innocence. Our focus is on helping people see abuse in a real, human way, not just through a legal lens. Because the truth is that many children have been deeply hurt by things that you may not be able to write in a police report, but those things still leave scars. We want to make children and their vulnerabilities visible. And we want to protect them, not just from what the law says is wrong, but from all forms of sexual harm. Since episode 1, we've been breaking down the mental barriers around child sexual abuse. We began by naming what's at stake, which is the lifelong cost of child violation. Then we redefined who a child is and what abuse looks like. With fresh eyes, we talked about how abuse is often rooted in power and deception. And in last episode, we looked at the biases and blind spots that make it easy for us to miss both the child who is being abused and the abuse they're experiencing. Think of those first 2 episodes as training for the heart. And now that we've built our ability to feel children's vulnerability and identified the many ways we've been blind to it, this episode is about building our sight. To help us understand why this matters, I want you to listen to a short clip from one of the people I spoke to during that earlier conversation. It contains a survivor's narrative and it might be triggering. So again, pause if you need to. And if it's possible, stay with me. So you shared your story with me last time and you spoke about some of the things that you were showing up, or some of the things that were showing up in your life that nobody paid attention to, and those were things that if someone had paid attention to them, they would have been able to tell that something was happening. What exactly were those things?
Okay, what happened to me exactly was, as a teen, my body language, I was trying to communicate with my parents through my body language, and they were not observing. And the other part, I was being isolated, and them also, they still did not observe. And my relationship with people also got affected, and my parents still did not observe. And what else? Okay. And at some point, it also affected my performance in school, and my parents still did not observe. So I was doing everything to communicate to them that I'm in a bad place, that I needed help. And those were the signs that I tried to communicate to my parents and I didn't observe.
That was a heavy minute, but I wanted you to hear it so you understand why we need to give this our full attention. What broke my heart the most was the way he kept repeating, they still did not observe. And yet they still did not observe. I was trying to communicate with my parents through my body language and they were not observing. I was doing everything to communicate that I was in a bad place, but they did not observe. And those may feel like a few words, but it is the condensed version of a child's betrayal and a society's failure, our failure to look with eyes that see, listen, learn, and provide the kind of support that children need to enjoy safety in this world. It is also a very important voice for me because it is a male adult, and male voices are often lost in this conversation. And I hope that you remember that boys get abused too, and many times they don't ever speak up. Today's episode is all about recognition, recognizing what abuse looks like, where it shows up, and the signs to look out for, especially when abuse happens or when groomers start preparing a child for abuse. To lay our first block for this building that will lead us up to gaining sight, let's take a moment to look at the forms of sexual abuse. When people hear the word abuse, they often think of one kind, just one kind of abuse. But CSA comes in different forms. The first form is the one most people think of when they hear the word, which is contact sexual abuse. So when they hear sexual abuse or child sexual abuse, they are thinking of all the kinds of abuse that involve physical contact with the child, which include touching or fondling the child's genitals or private parts, oral, vaginal, or anal penetration, which is rape or attempted rape, forcing the child to touch the abuser's private parts, kissing in a sexual way, sexual activities that are disguised as play, and use of objects for penetration or stimulation. Those are the kinds of things that we have in our minds, and those those are contact sexual abuse. But we also have non-contact sexual abuse, and this does not involve physical contact, but they still sexually exploit the child. And some of them are exposing the child to sexual acts, to people who are having sex and they bring a child into the picture, or flashing genitals or exposing genitals, which is called flashing. Someone opens up their clothes and shows their private parts to a child, or showing pornography to a child, taking sexual photos or videos of a child, which is child sexual exploitation material, or sexual conversations or messages, like in the case of sexting, or what people would do during the grooming process, which is give information to the child that is sexual in order to prepare them for abuse. And then we have voyeurism, which is watching a child undress or bathe without their knowledge. And some people might also think, how does this affect a child? The child probably doesn't even know that is happening, or in some cases they know it's not physical touch, but it is bad and it is violating because it breaches a child's right to control when and how their body is seen. Remember, this is about boundaries. This is about sexual autonomy. This is about your sexual space, something encroaching on your space. So it is a form of sexual exploitation because the abuser is using the child for sexual gratification. Then we also have, under non-contact sexual abuse, we have online exploitation. And this is one of the fastest growing forms of abuse right now. And it can start with something as simple as a message from a stranger. For example, if a teenage boy gets a friend request from someone who seems nice, someone that maybe even be around his age, and they begin to talk or flirt a little, and after some time, some form of trust is built, it could be male or female, and the other person asks them to send a private photo. And the boy, of course, when somebody says, send me nudes or anything like that, the person becomes cautious at first, but eventually, this is my friend, we've built a relationship. The boy gives in just one photo. But this is how it works. The minute that one photo is sent, everything changes. Suddenly, that person is now demanding more photos, or even threatens to leak the first one to all his friends or post it online. And this is called sextortion. And it doesn't just happen to teenagers. Children as young as 8 have been targeted, and it is fast growing. Or think about a 12-year-old girl who thinks she's chatting with another 12-year-old girl online or another preteen, and they laugh, they share secrets, and after a while, the person asks for a video call. But it turns out that the person on the other end is not a preteen or a 12-year-old as this girl thought. The child is now manipulated into saying or doing things that are recorded without their knowledge. Remember, they've already had a relationship, they've shared secrets and things like that. And this other person can begin to threaten the child with exposure. So this kind of abuse is not physical, but it can cause panic, it can cause depression, it can cause shame. And in some cases, there have been children who've actually taken their own lives as a result of this. And this form of abuse can happen quickly. It can happen quickly, it can happen within the first hours of their meeting. So it doesn't usually involve a long period of grooming. It can be from the first couple of times that they begin to have conversations. It can go on very quickly. Another form of child sexual abuse is exploitative or commercial sexual abuse. And this is the kind of sexual abuse where a child exchanges or a child is involved in sexual activities for money, for goods, or favors. For example, in survival sex is sexual activity that a child engages in for the sake of survival. And I'm going to contrast this with transactional abuse. And transactional abuse is where the child is abused in exchange for basic needs. So in survival sex, it's still survival in some way. When think of it like a refugee child, a refugee girl or boy who offers. In that case, often is a child who offers sex, but it's still exploitation because the adult knows better and the adult is taking advantage of the fact that the child needs help. So the child offers sex in exchange for, can I sleep in your house for the night? Can I eat there? Meanwhile, in transactional abuses, for example, a stepfather says, I won't be paying your school fees except you sleep with me or except you do any other thing sexual with me. So those are the differences. So exploitative or commercial sexual abuse takes the form of survival sex, transactional abuse, online sexual exploitation for profit, which is using children in pornographic content or putting up children for live streams, nude, and all of those things. And the last form we explore is grooming. Well, grooming can lead to contact or non-contact abuse. Sometimes the grooming itself is what causes the damage. And that is why some experts have argued that it should be recognized as a form of abuse on its own. And if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, how can grooming be abuse if no actual abuse happened? Remember, I'm saying that sometimes the grooming itself causes the deepest damage, and we're talking about forms of abuse, and now we're listing grooming under abuse. So how can it be abuse even though something has not happened? And I planned for that question, so stay with me. I'll walk you through some powerful research-backed reasons. First, grooming violates some of the most sacred parts of childhood. The safety of a child, trust, self-worth, and all of that can lead to a lifetime of internal crisis. And let me still trickle that down. Remember the picture we painted of grooming in the earlier episodes, the manipulation, the lies, the emotional exploitation, all the false promises that the abuser makes in order to gain access. Keep all of that in mind as we are going deeper. Or better still, picture this. Imagine that you're throwing things into a fire and accidentally you throw in a metal can. Halfway through, you realize that, that was not something you wanted to throw out, and you pull it out. You know that you may have saved the can, but chances are that the can will not be the same. And that is how grooming works. To prepare a child for sexual violation, the groomer has already done a lot of non-sexual harm. And that harm often or sometimes leaves lasting damage, even when the abuse, in quotes, has not happened. Let's even use adult abuse like intimate partner violence as an example. In order for a person to tear down another person enough to put them under subjugation or put them in a position that is not right for them, you realize, you see it in movies, you see it in real life, they'll first of all tear down their confidence. If I don't take you in, nobody will want you. It's because I love you. That's why I fight for you. I prefer to die with you than allow a misunderstanding to separate us. You'll never be good enough for any other person. So there are a lot of things that have been turned down in this person that even when they step out of the relationship, the things that have been said to them, the things that they've become, the things that have been spoken to them as a result of that relationship might still inform many of their choices down the line. So they might live there and connect with another abuser because even though abuse has stopped, a lot of non-sexual harm or a lot of non-physical harm was done to that person that continues to influence them. So in that sense, that's why people are arguing, or there are some experts who argue that grooming is also abuse on its own. And some of those kinds of damages that grooming creates toxic emotional dependence. So if a child feels like they are valued by this groomer through whatever means of emotional attachment that the groomer has done, when by the time the grooming stops or the groomer steps away, the child has already built this idea that I am wanted and I'm only wanted by you because of the things that this person has communicated. And that can set up things or set the child for things that are worse than that. And grooming also blurs boundaries. And this is something that I'm processing. It is really painful because sometimes the groomer or the grooming process of one groomer is interrupted. But the boundary blurred lines or the lines that the groomer has blurred along the way sets up this child to be abused by someone else. So in a painful way, one groomer prepares the child for another abuser to abuse the child. I don't know if that is clear now. But yes, grooming blurs boundaries. A child is told that they are special, they are asked to keep secret, and they are made to feel responsible for someone else's emotions. Slowly, they begin to lose track of what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Grooming also affects a child's understanding of safety, their voice, and their intuition. Because most times when these groomers begin, some children, especially older children, say, "Oh, I'm not comfortable with that." And then they talk the child out of something that was wrong. They give reasons, they explain things to the child. And in the end, that natural intuition that helped the child to be able to tell that something was going off there could be dulled by those explanations and by just continuing to be in that grooming process, even though at the end of the day, it is terminated before it gets to its final abuse stage. So some children might not know how to name their discomfort anymore, still under the fact that in the past, their emotions were discarded, or this person has spoken to them in such a way that made them feel like they were being dramatic or there was really nothing happening. And so they can begin to doubt themselves. They can find it difficult to say that, okay, this is what happened to me. It's almost like people in still abusive adult relationships where someone is being disrespectful to you or someone is being unkind or someone is hitting, and then they come every day and they try to warp your sense of reality. They try to tell you, no, that's not what is happening. This is really what is happening. I do all of this because I love you. And even though the thing is uncomfortable to you, you're still finding this person giving explanations that are not true. So even when someone else comes and says that is not right, someone has already shifted your perspective in such a way that can last for many years in that state. So grooming can also leave behind shame, can leave behind confusion, can leave behind betrayal, whether or not anything had escalated to the point of abuse. An adult can look back and think, I allowed that to happen. Or an adult can also look back and think, nobody wants me, or the kinds of people that want me, they want me for this. So it's a lot. So many adults are there who still carry that trauma, even when it was not abuse in the traditional sense. Some people are over trusting. Some people don't trust anybody, especially in relationships, in romantic relationships, in relationships that involve authority, or in mentoring relationships. Some people are unable to spot manipulation, even when manipulation is clear. They give people the benefit of the doubt too easily, because to survive the grooming process, they give themselves a lot of mental explanation. And now even when their gut is saying something is wrong, whether it's in marriage or in other big decisions in their lives, they just don't trust themselves. So they are over trusting of the world. And grooming is serious. And while I think that most of its workings, most of the things I have just said can be tagged under non-contact abuse, I think that the intentions of the people that are advocating for it to be kept aside is to make sure that we don't trivialize it, that we don't look at it as though it is just a tactic or something that once you've stopped it, you've stopped it. Because it's important that if you intercept grooming, given all these many things it can give birth to, that you spend the time to build back your child's boundaries, you talk them back into trusting their intuitions, you create opportunities to listen to them so that you know what the abuser had planted in their heads, even though the abuse did not happen fully. And you actually deal with that grooming report that you've received as though you are working with a child through the aftermath of an abusive episode, not just something bad that happened. So just to quickly touch on types of child sexual abuse clearly, I said clearly because we've established the types in different implicit ways, but the types reveal context and settings, and we've come to see that abuse can happen at home, which is intrafamilial abuse. This is abuse that involves brothers, sisters, uncles, etc. Abuse can also be extrafamilial, which involves other strangers or people who are away from the immediate family ties. And beyond physical locations, child sexual abuse can happen online, like we've established. Now that we've seen forms and now that we've seen types of sexual abuse or child sexual abuse, let's go on to age-specific signs of child sexual abuse. And I wanted to break this down into age-specific signs so that you take what you need quickly. So at infants, which are 0 to 2-year-olds, at this stage, children can't verbalize what is happening. So the signs you're looking for are primarily behavioral signs and physical signs. So some possible signs that you'll see if a child has experienced abuse, and please note that these signs do not mean that your child has been abused or is about to be abused or any of those things, but these are signs that at every point you see them, you should investigate them. They could be other factors that are causing these signs. It could be other stress factors, whether it's school, whether it's just a change of environment or different things that could create. For example, the very first thing I wanted to say is excessive crying. A child can be crying because the room is very hot. So please, it doesn't mean that your child has been abused. It doesn't mean that something has happened to them. But especially when all these signs couple together, or many of these signs couple together, or your child changes in a way that is very significant, is worth checking. And even if it's just this excessive crying, if a child was not crying on that level before, it might not be abused, but we're trying to train your eyes and to train your heart to not ignore things, because if you ignore things and say, okay, we've ruled out abuse, what happens when it is abuse and you're not aware? So understanding and building your sight is not just going to help you with dealing with, now I'm talking to the parent or caregivers or people that are directly at home with children. It's not only going to help you build your ability to spot abuse, it will also help you to be more conscious of your child, just as a person and as a person caring for children beyond abuse, because you need that foundational relationship to see anything. And we'll still talk about that before we end this episode. So excessive crying. If a child, a child didn't used to cry as much as that, and all of a sudden now they cry a whole lot, is worth checking. Clinginess or fearfulness around certain people. I recently read something off of Diary of a Nigerian Girl or Diary of a Niger Girl, and it was a story of a woman who just found out that her husband was physically abusing or has been physically abusing their 7-month-old baby. I hope I'm getting the story right. One of the signs, what led me down here is that one of the signs she said she observed that now in context, now that she's found or seen the husband do that, she now understands, is that every time she handed the 7-month-old baby to the husband, the child would begin to cry. And then she explained it away and thought that, oh, this is just mommy's girl. She just likes to be with mommy. So now she's found out that, okay, that was not it. This child was actually crying because the child was trying to communicate that they are not safe with this person. So crying, especially at this age, is one of a child's communication language. They've saw their diaper, they are crying. The room is hot, they are crying. So sometimes if a child suddenly begins to cry a lot or becomes fearful around certain people, it's possible that it's not just, to explain it away, be sure that your explanation is not just quick, and your explanation's goal is not just to step away from this discomfort, but your explanation is knowledgeable, your explanation has done its due work and everything. Second is regression. And this is when a child suddenly goes back in time, like They go back to an age, for example, if they were sleeping through the night, they no longer sleep through the night. If they are stopped bedwetting, they begin to bedwet. And from the first day I heard this as one of the signs of child sexual abuse, I was really curious about it. Why does the mind do that? Or why does it act like that? And I found what I'm going to share with you in this episode. I found that children go back in time for a couple of reasons. First, because the child is overwhelmed by the distress that is caused by the abuse. So they unconsciously return to a younger developmental stage where they felt safer. So if age 2 was a safe age, they go back there. If they last feel, it's not a conscious thing. It's not like the child says that and says, I'm going to be 2 tomorrow. But the mind, the brain has the ability to do that. So it goes back in time to an age where the brain remembers safety and begins to exist from that point. Another reason is emotional overload. Because children this age don't have the words or tools to express what is happening, they will cry more. That is still a regressive activity. If a child that stopped crying like a baby, they've grown to be able to communicate more and all of that. A child may go back to crying more, withdraw, and just go back to doing simpler things, go back to simpler behaviors. For example, I talked about bedwetting. If a child could come down and say, I want to go and use the restroom, now the child could lie down there and pee on themselves because it is simpler. The brain has shifted into survival. So another reason is that child sexual abuse can cause a sudden pause or reversal in the child's natural, emotional, social, and even physical development. So a child can suddenly pause on all the progress that they were making. And just, I was talking about survival in the previous point, because the child is now channeling all the energy of growing into surviving the trauma of sexual abuse. Another sign in age 0 to 2 is resistance to diaper changes or fear of being undressed. So you take your baby and every time you take them, they are crying about being undressed, and there's no, you've ruled out heat, you've ruled out every other thing that is sensible to that process. Is worth checking, is worth being sure, just doing an investigation around their body parts to be sure that nothing is happening. Genital or anal irritation, redness, bleeding. This is like when the private area is bleeding or is red. You should get to the root of that reaction or that event. Unusual interest or touching of the genitals at this age that goes beyond just typical children exploring their bodies. If a child is acting, you are looking at a 2-year-old and is acting in a way that a 2-year-old would normally not act around their body part or their body areas. They're trying to do things that they would normally not do. It's worth paying attention to. Maybe someone is sitting down, they're coming to try to lie on top of the person in a sexual way. It's worth paying attention to. Frequent urinary tract infections or unexplained rashes. It's another thing to pay attention to. If a child is having UTIs, 0 to 2, it's worth paying attention to. So we're going on to toddlers now, 2 to 4-year-olds. At this stage, children are beginning to speak, they play and taste boundaries at this age. So I'm beginning with their normal developmental expectations to lead into possible signs that you will find at that age. So at that age, if a child is being abused, they would likely begin to use sexualized language or play. Things that they are doing will begin to be sexualized. It will not be normal play, it will be play that is sexual in nature. And those kinds of play that you can see that this is not something a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old should be doing or should be able to do. And all these signs too it also depends on how knowledgeable we are, because some of the things that we flag off as sexualized behavior is not sexualized behavior. It's just that culturally you're just seeing a child touching their penis or their vulva, and then you're already worried, oh, what is happening? Why are you touching? Why are you touching? Those are normal, in most cases, it's just normal exploration. Nothing is happening beyond the surface. But as you learn and find language and find understanding, and as you listen to this podcast, you will find ways to understand and see. But trust your intuitions. You're looking at your child and you're seeing your child yourself. You're seeing, whether you're a teacher in school, you're seeing the child yourself. Wherever you are, whether Sunday school teacher, you're a witness to this child. So trust your intuitions, trust your instinct, and wherever you see sexualized play or language that is not age appropriate, please investigate. Fear of specific people or places without a clear reason. I explained that when I was talking about the 0 to 2-year-olds. So if they're suddenly afraid of people, specific places, ask questions. Ask questions. Sudden aggressive or withdrawn behavior. A child is suddenly very aggressive, suddenly withdrawn in their behavior. A child that used to be polite to a particular person is no longer polite to that person. Please ask questions, especially this age. This age might not be able to say much, so pay attention. So it's more of observation. I know I said ask question before, but it's more of observations. Follow the trail. Follow the trail. So whatever sign you see, each of the signs you see is a trail. So follow the trail until you find where it leads. Follow the trail. Sometimes you'll find, okay, it's just a stage of development. The child is just learning how to say no or learning how to communicate. Or it could just be that where communication is not strong enough between parents or between the teacher, or you're not able to just speak the child's love language. It could be something simple, but it could also be abuse. So follow the trail. And regression, we've talked about regression. So 2 to 4 year olds can experience regression. Child can begin to thumb suck. They can begin to suck their thumb. Children that have stopped doing that, they can stop speaking. I know that I listened to Maya Angelou's story where after the abuse with her uncle or somebody that's like an uncle, after a while she stopped speaking because she felt as though her voice was the reason that happened. It's a different situation, but I'm just showing you that speaking can be a trauma response. Like a child can stop speaking as a trauma response. So avoidance of touch or fear of being alone with certain people. Child can become afraid of being alone with certain people. It can become afraid of touch. Nightmares. A child can suddenly begin to wake up every night screaming, or sleep disturbances. The child is not able to sleep. Genital pain or difficulty sitting is another sign to pay attention to. A child is experiencing or complaining that their body parts or their private area is painful. Please look into that. Young children, 5 to 8 year olds, this age group has begun school and they have gained some social exposure. So some signs that you will see, like the survival narrative that I put up earlier, is a sudden drop in school performance or concentration. So a child can suddenly begin to fail at things that they were excellent at or that they were doing well in. Inappropriate sexual knowledge or language for their age, language that they would normally not use. Drawing or stories with sexual themes. And this is something I think I found this out last year, that children can show signs of abuse via drawing. So one of the people that was sharing that talked about how a child drew a picture without arms. And if you see a child drawing a picture without arms, you'll probably think, okay, it's just how they feel. Maybe like you won't connect it to them. You just think, okay, that's the expression. It's just what they want to draw. But there are people who have been trained, and we're going to have that conversation in later episodes because it was eye-opening for me, and I believe it's going to be eye-opening for a lot of people, educators, different people. They later found out the people who have been trained to recognize those kind of things, who know what to look out for, communicated, or when the drawing was taken to those people, they explained that the absence of arms is a child communicating helplessness. So that means the child's art was not random. And so sometimes children's art, a child, every time you give them crayon, they are only drawing angry things. One of the children drew a camera stand on one end, another camera stand on the other end, and the dogs on the bed. It turned out the father was using them for pornographic content. So a lot of things. So children's drawings, especially for educators, people in children's church, people in different organizations that serve children, children's drawings can give a lot of information. I was at a conference where I was speaking, and one of the people there said that in her class essay, a child disclosed abuse on the essay. And you can read that and think that the child is just communicating, is just telling a story. So curiosity is a tool. You will not see signs. You will see signs and ignore signs if you don't build curiosity, if you don't build what is going on in your world. Why did you draw this? This is very beautiful. Why don't they have arms? Who is this person? Why is he standing like this? Sometimes a child would draw a third arm. A child would draw a human being and then draw a third arm sticking out. Many of the times, that third arm is a child's, because children are very exaggerated in their minds, is a child trying to put out a man's private part, a man's penis, and that's just how they can draw it. And so they draw something that looks like a third arm. People that have been trained, and when we have that conversation, you too will be able to have the eyes that can see, and we'll have it soon. But there are people that, and you can do your research. You can just open up and begin to look at certain signs in drawings or stories that children make that can help you know that, okay, this is an abusive. Please do research. Don't just take only the things that I'm communicating on this podcast. There are a lot of things to learn about child sexual abuse that I may not get to, because I'm also trying to make sure that you have all this information within a time frame that you can sit through. So do research. Your drawings or stories with sexual themes are things to investigate. Mood swings, anxiety, frequent crying. A child is happy now, not happy tomorrow. Just noticeable mood swings, frequent crying, anxiety, 2 to 4, age 5 to 8, that's where we are now, is worth paying attention to. Obsessive masturbation. Now note the word obsessive masturbation, because children do something that looks like masturbation in normal sexual exploration. So obsessive masturbation, where they begin to touch themselves in a way that it looks like they're trying to deal with something or they're trying to reenact something, is worth paying attention to. Sexual behaviors toward other children. Your child has been reported from school, was trying to look under somebody's skirt, was trying to do something that points to the fact that this child might be exposed to something, is worth paying attention to. Excessive secrecy or anxiety when they are changing clothes. They don't want to change their outfits around other people. This could also be that the child wants to have a private change area. So remember, all of this is not an automatic sign that a child is being abused, but it's worth paying attention. Medical issues, like we talked about, frequent urinary tract infections or physical injury or bruises in the genital area, is also worth paying attention to. The next category of children are preteens, children 9 to 12. At this phase of life, they are more self-aware, they are social, and they are secretive because puberty has neared. And some possible signs that you'll see in children 9 to 12 years old are depression. The child just becomes depressed, just feels like this bright child. And I feel like some of the times we notice these things, but we explain them away, like I said in the other episode. Why are you now like this? Or we nag them about it. You move quickly. You don't dance in church again. You don't behave like this again. And I'm saying this from experience because I feel like I came in and out of depression at different points and nobody just asked me, what is going on with you? Everybody had an explanation. Now you are too big to dance in church. Now you are too this, you're too that. So don't nag the child. Be honestly curious. Be honestly involved in the child's world. So anger is another emotion that you might see and is worth questioning. Sudden withdrawal from friends and family, especially if the child is being groomed. Sudden withdrawal. Increased sexual behaviors or talking about sex in explicit ways. It's another way to, don't just say, oh, your child's she has gone to school now, she's doing things that are not right. Pay attention. Hyperarousal is a trauma response where a child begins to do things like they are promiscuous. It's a trauma response. Children that have been abused can try to regain control over that sense of violation by beginning to try out other things. And also the body can begin to, remember that sexual relationship is like a fire, and sometimes that fire can, if it is not, when a child is able to have the control and the emotional maturity to take control of that fire can spread in ways that are harmful to that child. Low self-esteem, self-harm, or talk of not wanting to leave. So if a child begins to say they don't want to leave again, they're experiencing low self-esteem, they want to harm themselves, it's worth investigating. Running away or staying out without permission. A child suddenly leaves the house and runs away. It's not a time for punishment. It's a time to ask real questions in case the harm is in your house and they're just trying to run away from the harm in the house. Dressing inappropriately for their age or suddenly changing their dress habits. Maybe a child used to be very expressive with their clothes. They could wear their normal clothes, and then all of a sudden a child says he wants to cover everything from head to toe, or sometimes a child says he wants to dress more provocatively. It could be anything. So you just ask gentle questions, be genuinely curious, like I've been saying and repeating over and over again. And then school refusal. It could also be that the harm is in school, or the child doesn't want to engage with people. So it's like, I don't want to go back to school. Different things. So ask questions. Anxiety around certain environments, ask questions. Especially at this age, 9 to 12, they're able to communicate to an extent. So build safety, or build a safe space and ask questions. And I don't know if I've said it in previous episodes, but safety is not a promise. Safety is an experience. And many times we say, you can talk to me about anything, but we are not people that people can truly talk to about anything. And I always say that adults, our best friends are not people that said you can talk to me about anything. The people that we've made into best friends are people that over time have made us feel safe, whether it is the person selling ugu in the market, or the person that is selling fee, or whatever it is, whatever type of product. I'm using that to show whether we are literate or not educated. We always choose people that we are safe around. So why would we now expect that we that are not safe around, that children will feel safe around us just because we've said that they are safe people? So if you're already shouting over something as simple as a glass of wine or a glass cup falling on the ground, then, or you're already doing things in a way that you're already not controlled or regulated in your emotions, it's most likely that the child will not feel safe around you enough to communicate. So build a safe space and then ask the questions that are important that will lead you to these answers. And we'll still talk about how to navigate disclosures and how to ask the right questions in another episode. Well, today we're just giving you eyes. Another day we'll give you language. Today we're giving you eyes. Last episode we came to build your heart's ability to receive, and today we're building your sight. We're doing this together. So another thing is increased fear of being alone or being touched. A child can become jumpy. All of those are telling you a story, and that story is a story that you have to investigate. In teenagers, 13 to 17-year-olds, teenagers understand more about sexuality at this stage, but they also they struggle to disclose abuse because of shame, confusion, or the fear of just not being believed. So possible signs, you might see what looks like sexual promiscuity, which I've explained is hyperarousal, or just a fear of all sexual contact, anything that looks sexual in nature, whether it's someone touching them or someone hugging them, anything that feels close. I feel like I should rather say fear of everything physical, everything that is intimate, Depression or drug and alcohol use, children might begin to manage the pain or manage the trauma or manage the emptiness or whatever it is that is going on inside them by turning to drugs and turning to alcohol use, or just eating. Some children have been known to starve to look less attractive for the people who are presently abusing them. Some people have been known to eat up. Some children have tried to fatten their way out of abuse, just become so fat that the abuser no longer sees them, or so heavy that the abuser no longer sees them as attractive. So it could be something like that is going on with your child. So please ask questions. Self-harm, cutting or burning themselves, suicidal thoughts or attempt. Isolation. Child can suddenly drop out of school or lose interest in previous hobbies they used to enjoy. Secretive behavior around their devices, especially in the case of online abuse, or being overly defensive or loyal to a particular person. Is still in the case of abuse, or a grooming in this case. And then sudden unexplained material possessions. Remember I said that a music teacher or math teacher or tutor can come to home lessons every day with gifts and all of those things in the grooming process. So every time you see a child with unexplained material possessions, please ask questions. Those may be signals of grooming. So these signs can result, like I said, from many other factors. It can be stress factors, it can be developmental challenges that are not child sexual abuse. But if multiple signs are present, especially with a certain appearance, it's important that you trust your instinct and you create a safe opportunity for your child to communicate. And I felt like it was wise to also just explain or pull out how to identify grooming on its own. And I also had a question in this direction from the last episode, because the person was genuinely asking, how will I know that all this fun uncle that this child is fond of is not just an uncle, is somebody with evil intent, or is someone that's already doing something to the child? And I would say unexplained secrecy or withdrawal, especially around certain people. So if a child suddenly becomes very secretive around a certain person, you would want to ask questions, or they begin to withdraw from certain people, it's important to ask questions. Sudden anxiety or clinginess or fear of being around specific individuals, it's another question asking sign. It's another sign that should get you to ask questions. Age, inappropriate sexual behavior or knowledge, especially when it does not fit into that child's developmental stage. A teenager would have knowledge about sex, so you cannot say, well, where have you found that sexual language? They're in school, they're in different places, they watch movies, so they would have knowledge about sex. Mood swings from being unusually cheerful to being withdrawn. It can be different things. It could be a child just trying to be all bubbly to hide the fact that something is happening to them. It could also be a child who is becoming very withdrawn. It could also be a child who's suddenly angry without clear cause. So changes in body boundaries, flinching at touch, becoming overly sexualized, or suddenly being more protective of their body. So this all still ties into the normal signs that you would see if a child is being abused, even if it's not a grooming process. Another thing, emotional things that you should pay attention to, emotional signs, are sudden attachment or obsession with an older person. It could be an adult, it could be a teen, especially somebody who seems overly interested in them. Should pay attention when a child has sudden attachment, suddenly so attached or obsessed with an older person. It's important to pay attention to that relationship. It might be a grooming process. It might also not be. So you want to ask questions and you want to gently set boundaries. Draw the child to boundaries. You want to gently say, okay, remember that this is so and so person. And remember, sex educate. Give all of those informations. Make sure that everything the child needs to know is known. Mommy loves you, daddy loves you. Or if it is a system, know that in this school you can always speak to guardians and counseling. You can always speak to your class teacher to escalate whatever issue it is to the top. Remember, give information. And if you've checked that that relationship is not a relationship that is harmful, prepare the child in case the relationship changes and it's just that you are meeting it earlier. Because sometimes people notice grooming, ask the questions, and it is just that they are noticing it earlier. So they've noticed that and the main process has not started, and then they step back and they ignore. Don't ignore any sudden attachment or obsession with an older person. Don't ignore it at all. If you find there's nothing, just do the due diligence of setting boundaries. Set boundaries for the child. Give the child boundaries that they can work within that relationship, and then set boundaries within your home. If it's a tutor, set boundaries in school. If it is a school teacher, you can't give this to my child. You can't do this with my child. Set boundaries. Conflicted emotions. If a child is expressing love or guilt or fear about someone that they used to trust, so somebody was trustworthy and now the child is acting as though they're afraid or they're feeling guilty about something, is something to investigate. Shame or fear when they're discussing relationships, particularly with older people or with adults. If they're showing a form of fear, if they're just ashamed, you want to ask questions about that. Sudden burst of maturity or deep emotional insight that is beyond their age. Remember that it's a grooming process begins with the person forming this unusual attachment. Sometimes people turn children into people that they dump information on or emotional things on to create this I trust you, to force children to believe that they are older than they actually are. No, you're not a child. I can tell you anything. So if you suddenly find that your child is having information that is not just wisdom and is not just intelligence and is not just a child who is well read, it is actually that you're hearing your child speak in ways that are too mature for that age, it's possible that they have been exposed to adult situations and it's possible that a grooming is underway. Gift or money, to material clues that you should look out for. Gift or money or devices that the child cannot explain, or of course the child can explain, just that they don't want, they've probably been told to be secretive about it. So anything that the child cannot explain, it's important to investigate. access to private spaces like rooms or rights with someone who shouldn't have unsupervised time with them. So if you find that every time they are trying to slip into somebody's room and trying to go out with somebody or have unsupervised time with the person, you want to set boundaries around that relationship. You want to call the possible groomer to order, and you want to make sure that that gap is closed. Remember that groomers exploit gaps, and you want to constantly be vigilant as to what gaps exist in your home or in your institution or wherever it is that children are being served. New possessions that don't match the family's resources, and we've talked about this possession that just comes from a friend or from a secret relationship. You want to investigate that, and you want to set boundaries. Most of the time when someone is suddenly giving, already in your home or in your institution, there should be a standard conversation as to how gift giving happens. Who can give you gifts? How does gift happen? Who do you take permission from in order to even receive a gift? And all of those children need protection, and they need boundaries. They need boundaries not just for their sake, but also so that other people because people take advantage of children who lack boundaries and who have not been put within a boundary within their system or their homes. Digital red flags or digital clues that suggest that grooming may be happening. We talked about protectiveness over phone or digital devices, secretive use of apps. They are using their social media with padlock and with passwords, different things, receiving messages late at night or from unknown contacts. You're seeing your child every night. They're trying to go to the restroom. They're trying to find some place far away isolated from the rest of the family, to have conversations that seem like conversations with people that they should have in public, like in the presence of other people. And child shouldn't even have somebody that they are calling away from the family, just so that there's a constant monitoring that is safe. Reluctance to share who they are talking to online, or defensiveness when they are questioned. So you want to gently call them to yourselves and be sure that this behavior or this reluctance to even mention who they are talking to online is natural, or nothing is happening. There are most cases that particular thing cannot be natural. Relational red flags, it could also be natural, I should just say, because sometimes people ask children questions in a way that feels suggestive, and that could feel like I'm not doing anything and I don't need to prove that to you. So you don't want to already tell who is this person that every time you're talking to them, I want to see in case you're doing something with somebody. A teenager, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, will tell you I don't want to show you my phone. And then if I don't put this boundary around this information, you're probably going to think they said when they don't want to show you their phones, it's probably that they are being groomed or they're in an abusive relationship. And that's not what we're saying. If you ask respectfully and you ask kindly and they don't want to share who it is that they're talking with online, you want to still gently see how to get to that child to make sure that they're not in an unsafe situation. You want to set boundaries. You also want to be firm. So it's like, if you can't talk to me about who is on the other end of the phone, then I'd have to take it from you for a period of time, because I am invested in your growth. I'm invested in your safety, and you have not yet reached the stage where I can allow you to take charge of such decisions in your life. You're the parent, you are the caregiver here, so you have that right. Relational red flags, isolation from their peers or family, especially when the isolation now becomes that they are channeling all their love and their attention to one person or one adult or one teen. Frequent references to someone, suddenly you're like, only uncle this and this person understands me, only auntie this and this person understands me. And every time they're saying that that's the only person who understands them amongst everyone in the family, it's worth drawing a boundary with that person. And it's also worth communicating to that person that within your family, if this is a parental relationship, you want to be a person of trust. They don't need to have a relationship with your child, but you need to have a relationship with your child. So a relationship that has become a problem where your child says, oh, and of course, these are still things to keep within a high level of self-awareness. If you're a very hard person to deal with, a child will naturally gravitate to another family member that is more comfortable for them. And that doesn't mean that an abuse is happening in that other relationship. It just means that, is there something we can learn from this uncle that this child is constantly trying to be with? Is there a way that has he cracked a way to respond or talk to this child in a way that honors this child's individuality? So you want to have that conversation. You want to be self-aware enough to be honest with yourself and not just be quick So a noticeable power imbalance in a relationship with one person having more control, influence, or secrecy, whether it's two friends who are the same age, and we will talk about child on child sexual abuse, where two children can be the same age, but one is abusing the other person because he's in a position of greater power or influence or something. So you want to investigate such situations. And grooming specific dynamics is still, we talked about a child defending the groomer even when they are confronted with a concerning behavior. Maybe you've seen something, or maybe someone has sent a message to your child and you saw the phone and you're wondering, okay, why are you people having this kind of conversation? It's like, and the child tries to make an excuse for that person. It's probably that they've gone far in that grooming process and the child is in danger. Remember, this is about the child. It's never the child's fault. It's not that you didn't tell me. We are looking for these signs not to punish the child. We're looking for these signs to make sure that we are quick to solve the problem before it escalates. So the child talks about keeping secrets as something that is positive. If a child suddenly begins to talk about keeping secrets as though it's a positive or a very special thing that people are very mature, they keep secrets. Because children, especially when children are young, they talk about things without realizing the clues. Children are quite easy when you pay attention. Because children will begin to, maybe amongst their friends, they'll say, oh, whatever is the groomer has fed them, they will feed it back into their space. It's just that people are not paying attention. So a child can begin to say, he's maybe around her friends, and you're probably in the kitchen just walking and she's just chatting with her friends and saying, it's big girls know how to keep secrets. Or big boys know how to keep secrets. Not everything you tell everyone, you have to be mature in the mind. And they begin to say all of these things. It's likely they're borrowing language from someone who is grooming them and has given them abusive language as a sign of maturity. A shift in language. They said, I'm mature for my age. Just very connected to what I just said. Someone starts to tell them that they're mature. You're very mature for your age. Wow. They celebrate them for they raise them in their minds to a point that is unrealistic. That is not true, because a child is not mature for their age. A child is a child. So we have something special, different things. Those are grooming specific dynamics. So if you notice any of these signs, like I said before, and your gut tells you that something is not right, it's important that you trust that instinct. To wrap up this episode, I want to say something that is very key. The primary defense most times that you will have against any form of abuse, because most times you won't have signs, most times there will be nothing to show you that, oh, this is happening. The primary defense you have, I would say 98% of the time or 70% of the time, is presence. Whether it's an institution, whether it's a family dynamic, presence. And presence, I would define presence as consistent, conscious attention. So it is the consistent, conscious attention that we give to a child's emotional world, physical space, and relational environment. Consistent, conscious attention that we give to a child's world, their physical space, and their relational environment. And the goal of all of that is to make sure that we protect them, we keep their dignity safe, we keep their voices intact, and we make sure that they've not walked into something that they are not aware is harmful to them. And for me, that word presence is an umbrella for many different things. That presence translates to communication. Like I said, sometimes you will not see anything. And the only line of defense you will have is your child's disclosure, is the relationship that you have that your child can walk in and say, mommy, daddy, or the communication also does not just finish it at home. Communication in schools. What I mean by that is that there's such a communication system that children know in schools, children know in institutions, that this is where you go if you're harmed. This is an anonymous, the anonymous report box. There's something, there are safe systems of communication that a child can always walk towards. There is constantly communicated in the assembly, is communicated in staff meetings, is communicated by staff meetings. I mean, it's communicated to teachers so they can communicate to the children. It's communicated constantly so that a child knows that they can walk up. So sometimes the only defense you have is that you need to be a space, you need to be an environment, you need to be a person that the child feels comfortably enough to disclose to. So once communication lines are shut, you've already lost significant ground. Once communication lines are shut, you've already lost significant ground. So presence also translates to careful, knowledgeable observation. So learn enough about abuse so that you can spot it easily. Be careful to observe, but don't just observe, because right now, if you don't know these signs, all these things that we're talking about, you will not be knowledgeable enough to know what you're seeing. You can be looking at abuse in the face and you don't know that that's abuse that is looking back at you. So you want to learn enough so that when you see abuse, you are able to spot it. Another thing that presence translates to is curiosity. And I've said this all through my time talking about the signs. What is happening in the personal times that your child has with anybody aside from you? Where are they going to school? What are the policies around school? Your child has joins the school bus. Every time the school bus drops this child very late, and other families have gone home. Children went by school ended by 1, and your child returns home every time by 6. We have stories of school bus drivers, school bus attendants that take home people's children, do harmful things to them, and return them home. Take home, I mean take them to their own homes, especially in institutions and schools where children are committed only to bus drivers. So bus drivers go along with the children alone, and there's no second or third accountability or check to make sure that the children that have left get home as at the time they were supposed to go. So we have a lot of cases where children are taken by bus drivers, are taken by people who are given charge over them, and things are done to them because there's nobody curious as to what time did you leave school and how come you were home by this time, and not with the goal of blaming the child, with genuine curiosity to make sure that harm is not taking place and making sure that there's a correspondence. Okay, my child came back as a so time. I want to know from the school why this occurrence. I need it to be investigated. I need to get to the bottom of the reason my child came back as at so and so time. It's not about the child. You can ask the child questions, of course, especially if they're older, but we're not trying to blame them because abuse is never about the child. So we have protectiveness, set boundaries ahead of time. Presence translates to protectiveness. So when you are present, you are able to see and you're able to notice, and then you should set boundaries. You're able to know the challenges that would likely come in if there are no boundaries. Set boundaries ahead of time, whether it is at home or whether this is an institution. Set grooming specific guidelines. For example, in your house, especially if you live in a large house where other people like family members and others are staying with you, set grooming specific guidelines like no private or monitor time. So no adults can spend time and should be allowed to spend time with a child in a secluded or unsupervised space, whether it's school, wherever it is, no closed doors, no outside nobody leaves the main environment and goes off into another part of the house or anything without consent, without your consent, whether this is school or at home. No secret communication. So the adult around this child or the adult around your children should never text, should never call or message or interact with children on social media or via other private channels without parental knowledge or without transparency. If this is a school, make sure that there are grooming specific guidelines to make sure that teachers are not texting children online. All of those things are not happening, and children are aware that if that happens, it is an encroachment on their personal space. Teach children about power imbalance. Teach them that the adults around them have more influence than them, more knowledge than them, and that there's a reason why they are shielded from all the influences that adults sometimes exert on children, and which is to make sure that they are not influenced and they're not taken advantage of by people who are more knowledgeable than they are and people who want to exploit them for their personal gains. So no special treatments. Discourage adults within your system, whether it's at home, from giving. Don't let people just come to your house. There's somebody from church or somebody from a trusted environment who just comes every day and gives excessive gifts or makes excessive privileges or access to specific children within your home. Sometimes favoritism is a common grooming tactic. So if no physical contact outside agreed boundaries. All physical interaction must be appropriate. It must be child initiated. Let it be that it's a child that wants a hug, wants a handshake. So all physical contact must be appropriate. That's where attention comes in, that you're watchful. You're making sure that you're looking at what is happening. And if it's a system, that there are systems that are watching to be sure that physical interactions are appropriate, that children are the ones initiating physical contact like hugs, if any, and things like lap sitting and tickling should never be assumed to be normal. So there should be an open door visibility rule. All interactions between your children and other adults, or children within your institutions and other adults, should be observable and interruptible. All conversations must happen in places that are observable and interruptible. So we must be able to see you, and you must be able to interrupt what is happening. That means it must be in open space and it must not be secretive. So use open doors, use windows, keep open doors open, keep windows open, and make sure your interactions are in public setting. Like I said, document and report boundary pushing behaviors. Red flag every behavior that looks like secrecy, isolation, subtle touching, or emotional overdependence. Red flag it within your institution. Red flag it to your children. Tell them that anybody amongst the people you've admitted into your house that tries to tell you that, oh, let's have something secret, you might only expose your children to this grooming language, this grooming within safe boundaries or safe emotional and language communication. Let them understand how grooming works. Ignorance has never served anybody. Ignorance does not serve children. We don't teach children so that children will protect themselves, but it can be a line of defense, and we don't want to leave children defenseless. So you want to make sure that we've given them eyes that see. We've helped them in child-safe language to understand when something is going off the rail, something is going the way it's not supposed to go. So make sure to red flag behaviors like subtle touching. Someone is suddenly just brushing their hands over your chest or your breast area. Can someone mistakenly do that? Of course. But by the time you've communicated it to a child, I have younger people around me, I have children around me, that anything that involves things like that, they call you out on it and they tell you, oh, you touched my so and so thing. And then you say, oh, I'm sorry, this is what happened. But it's been ingrained in their minds that is off limits. So whether it's mistake or not, they call you out on it and they insist that you notice that boundary had been crossed. So we also have parent and child consent for all interactions, and we talked about that. Make sure that at every point in time, whether it's mentorship, one-on-one, or any special time, it must be something that you have consented as an adult or a guardian to a child, and it must have clear purpose. I talked about in the last episode of a mentoring relationship where a child goes for long hours. Yes, the abuser can create those kind of experiences, but it's also important that you set boundaries with time frames. My child cannot stay in your house for mentoring alone. My child, except maybe he's a man, for example, the last episode I talked about a mother who's been looking for a father figure for the child, and now this man is actually a grooming abuser and has now taken the child and has done all of these things. Except he's a man who has a a whole family situation where they are parent, the wife is there, the children are there, and the children are as old as your child, all of those things, and you've probably visited them or had a clear relationship, or you've vetted them. I feel like that's the word I was looking for. You've vetted them and you're able to know that these are safe people for your children. They have safe practices within their homes. Then you can probably be a little bit free. But other than that, have clear time frames, have clear guidelines. And please remember that as long as your child leaves your sight, if there's no communication between you and your child in a normal way, you will have already lost significant ground. Because every minute a child spends away from you is a dangerous minute, is a possible abusive time. A child does not need a perfect parent, but do your best to have a hold on communication and practice repair. And I say this as much as I can. Children don't need perfection, they just need repair, because some of the feelings of I can't talk to my mom, I can't talk to my dad, I can't talk to anybody, it's because nobody says sorry for anything. You come back from work and life has happened and you have so much to do, and you lash out at a child who does not deserve that. A child asks you a question and you go off the rails. It is important that you come back later and say, Mommy is not angry with you, Daddy is not angry with you, I'm not mad at you, I had a difficult day at work and I'm so sorry that I allowed myself to be in that position. What were you trying to say to me? Always practice repair. Children are not looking for perfection. They're looking for steady, emotionally regulated parent. And I feel like this is a good point to also say that many times in our parenting experiences, because I have had a bit of childcare experience, and I find that one of the biggest temptation and one of the things that I don't think we are talking enough about is the fact that sometimes parents convince children, and in psychology they would say gaslight, parents convince children out of their reality sometimes, especially to avoid accountability. And if you do that regularly, you will set up your child to be abused. And I will explain what I mean by that. Because, for example, a child says, when you dragged my hands, you dragged me too hard. Or mommy, the way you talked to me yesterday, or daddy, the way you talked with me yesterday, I felt very hurt. And you say, what is that? Me, how did I talk to you? So somebody cannot talk with you calmly. When you know that you did not talk calmly, you know that you went off the roof, you know that you went, so you have to be able to have self accountability so that you can endure accountability from outside of you, and so that you can also respect children's voices. Because if you don't respect their voices, they will not trust their intuitions when things are going wrong around them, because you've convinced them out of the reality that you hurt them. And so by the time they're trying to express their feelings, you've communicated to them that your feelings don't matter. I tell you what I'm doing. So when abusers also come and tell you, I am not hurting you, I'm telling you what I'm doing to you, and what they are doing is not what the child is experiencing, then we see how things go. So it's preparing children or managing children or helping children to be safe is a lot of self-responsibility. It needs a lot of growing up, systems growing up in their policies and in the things that they are bringing to the table, parents, caregivers growing up. And we will still talk a lot about how caregivers and parents and all of these other things, we will go to all of those details. But right now, I just wanted to chip that in. If you are gaslighting your children, or if you're causing them to doubt their reality, you may actually be setting them up to be unable, especially older children, to be unable to see when harm is coming, because you've already trained them that they can't trust their minds and they can't speak for themselves. So grooming education is another important thing that should exist within your system. You should inform, I think I talked about this earlier, regularly educate staff, volunteers, your children, and let them know how groomers work and their patterns. Let them know what is okay and what is not okay, even when it looks nice. So have clear consequences for boundary violations. If you've told anybody in your house, you cannot be in the same room with my daughter or with my son, and you come and they are there, zero tolerance for adults who break those kinds of boundaries. You have to nip it in the bud once you see it. Early intervention is key. Normalize speaking up. Teach children and adults that it's safe to speak up, and encourage them to question adults' behavior. Encourage children that they are allowed to say, you can't do that to me. I will not have a little child who tells me, don't say to me, shh, say excuse me. So teach children to use their voice, because it will protect them. So if a child at 5 or at 4 can say to me, don't call me shh, say excuse me. So I have more faith that a child will be able to call out another person, because they are safe around me. They are my friends. So they should let that slip. But no, they've learned what is respectful. And that's another thing. So sometimes we're already abusing our children verbally and in other ways. And all of those things set them up for other forms of abuse. Children draw how they should be related with from how you relate with them. I'm still talking to parents now, because first of all, the family is the first unit of society. So children draw how they should be related with how you relate, from how you relate with them. So if you're already treating them in ways that make it hard for them to notice violating behaviors, because you already violate them with your words and with the way that you act around them, then when other people are violating of them, they won't be able to tell the difference. Thank you for being part of today's conversation. It's very easy to avoid conversations about child sexual abuse because it's difficult and intense. But every week you're learning, something is shifting inside you in a way that will benefit children. In the next episode, we'll go beyond the children and into their environment. Now that our heart is in the right place and we know what to look out for in children, it is important that we talk about the environmental, cultural, and social factors that enable or leave gaps for abuse to occur. Remember, each episode in this season builds on the last. We are not just talking, we are laying a foundation. one that will help you see more clearly, listen more closely, and respond with confidence. A lot of you have also made it your personal task to share the podcast publicity materials as well as the podcast itself with family and friends. I know someone who made sure to follow up every person they sent it to until they finished listening. That's the kind of investment that children need. And that's why we're creating a listening community for this podcast. If you click the Telegram link in the episode description, you'll be added to a listening community group for other people like you who desire to actively participate in intercepting child sexual abuse through awareness. The weekly task is simple, but it's impactful. That is the weekly task of the listening community. All you have to do is share the podcast weekly, get 5 people to listen fully each week, host or attend, and I'm excited about this, host or attend short listening groups, either in person or online. So what I mean by listening groups is that, remember at the beginning of the episode, we would say, place your devices, take beside someone or invite someone to lean in. So we want to make it more deliberate. We want to make it we want to systemize it or give it some structure so that it's not just a gentle prompt, it's actually a commitment. So we want you to, every week, it could be as simple as your neighbors, that you gather people, 4 people, 2 people, 3 people, and you say, oh, I'm listening to this podcast, it's on child sexual abuse, give them a little backdrop and then gather them and listen together. Why do we need these listening groups? Because sometimes by themselves, people might not still be able to distill this information into helpful bits. But because you know and because you've been so committed to this journey and because you've already learned so much, by the time you are done listening with this group, you can always give them perspective. You can always answer the questions. We are not in people's homes. Some people might not have the ability to send us a mail or find us on social media, but they have you. And if you're listening with them, it can actually spark real conversations. So I'm excited about this. And I hope that you're excited about it too. So on the group, people are going to send in pictures. If where your listening group is happening, you can send in your Zoom screenshot. It's just to create accountability and to also encourage other people on the group to go ahead and do same. So I look forward to it. So you're also going to receive weekly publicity tools to post easily on that group. On that group, you'll be able to have access to the flyers, have access to information, and most importantly, like I've been excitedly saying, we will be able to spark real conversations in our community and in the places around us. I believe this will create such a change, and I'm already receiving a lot of life-changing feedback. And imagine what will happen if we get everyone to listen into this podcast. For this week's call to action, I want you to join the listening group. Yes, you must have assumed I'll say that. For this week's call to action, I want you to join the listening group. But beyond that, go over the episodes again. Don't let this be another material that you receive. Actually sit with these facts until you can tell that you've gotten it, like it has gotten into you. It has challenged what it needs to challenge. You've been able to see what you need to see. Actually sit with it. So go over intro episode, go over episode 1, episode 2, and this episode 3. Write us if you have questions or things to share. We absolutely want to hear from you. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Intercept CSA and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast so you can get notifications and be one of our first listeners. Remember, together we can intercept abuse and protect the children we all care about. Together we can intercept for future. Until next week. See you.